So guys, I want to do another tough video and I want to talk about patting people on the back. And I know that this may be a little bit of a like what's this guy talking about? But there is an issue in our culture of patting people on the back or petting people. And that really needs to stop because, there's two things about that. If a man pats another man on the back or pets another man, nobody really cares. But if I did that to a woman, it's like, oh my God, this man's trying to rape me, or it's rape or sexual assault or sexual harassment. And that's also true, not just me, but any other man. And I just think that, and this is also a controversial take, there's some homoeroticism to that. I work in a hospital, and there's this guy named Javon who would be rubbing my chest and be like, or get close like he wants to kiss me. So the thing about it is that I reported that, but the thing about it is that, we live in this world where I really feel like with men, we kind of just, men don't really have, we really don't respect boundaries of men a lot. And I always would say that too, like if I ever did that to a woman, the things that Javon was doing to me, you know what, I would lose my job immediately. But I reported that, and I've also had an issue at my job too, where this guy Lou was like tickling people's wrists, rubbing people's wrists, putting his hand on people for a while, and he's also talking about how he wants his sexy pregnant daughter to move back home, really, So it's just weird, like how when men sexually harass men or when men pat men on the back, really, that's not treated like a big deal, really. I remember when I was a kid, I've told the story that, my dad would do something like he would, and then he'd be like, and other things like that. So I always kind of wonder why, when those things happen, really, we don't make a big deal. But I remember it stopped when I talked to a therapist about that. But I always kind of wonder why, when men get sexually harassed, or when we pat men in the back or we touch men, it's not really, treated as such a big deal in this country. But overall, I think the general consensus is that, we got to be a little bit more upfront with people, be like, hey, I don't really appreciate that, or, watch your boundaries. Or sometimes, even I talk about, what I do with my dad, that stopped when I talked to a therapist about it, because, a grown man should not be slapping their kid on the ass like they're like a wife or whatever. Or I know some people, my parents are gay, and one of my brothers will not give him a hug, really, because they're uncomfortable. My dad will be like, no, you get here and give me a hug. Or sometimes, I remember sometimes when my dad would hug me, he would be petting my hair and doing all that. Sometimes we gotta tell people, respect our boundaries, And sometimes, as my dad said, is that not everything's meant to be sexual, but there is a line that needs to be, I'm uncomfortable with this, or I was brought up in a different way, or there's signs of affection that's just inappropriate, really. Because it is going to get to a point where, some people may say, hey, I'm taking a plane tomorrow. So I know sometimes with TSA, they pat you down. And I know some people will say things like, hey, don't be gay with me, or, as long as you're not trying to be a faggot or whatever, really, whatever. We're getting to a point where people are being outspoken, or they may take things out of context, really. Or I know, when I was talking to my dad about, the issues that I've had at my job, he said to me, not every touch is meant to be sexual, but honestly, if somebody's rubbing your son's chest, getting close to your son like they want to, kiss them, then you're not getting the right context, really. But also, too, as a parent, we can all agree that, if a relative is spanking your kid on the butt and chuckling, that is completely inappropriate. And even if you're messing around or it was not meant to be sexual, that is a sexual act, really. It's almost like, I've seen people do this before. Like sometimes, if they're friends with somebody, they'll be grabbing each other's crotches or punching each other in the crotch, or I remember like how Randy Orton with his wife, he would be poking her breast or jiggling her breast. It's like, and that may just be a way to be funny, really. But it's almost like, if a parent did that to their child in any circumstance, that's automatic, like, sexual, inappropriate sexual touching. And I would also say too that, like in any other context with anybody that you don't really know, that's sexual assault, really. But yeah, like these things do hurt, and I definitely think that I'm gonna be a lot more outspoken if people put their hands on me, really. But it's definitely not something that's okay, really, because I know like when I grew up, I didn't have a lot of self-confidence, or I didn't really have a lot of shame, or I didn't really care about embarrassing myself, because I did grow up in an environment where I felt like, in certain cases that, my boundaries didn't matter, or people embarrassing me or talking bad about me or emotionally abusing me or disrespecting me didn't really matter, really. So some of the reasons why I was like so self-destructive when I was younger was because I kind of grew up with, anybody can grab me, anybody can put their hands on me, anybody can pat me on the back, anybody can kind of like, or I would have a younger brother too, that would be like when he was a little kid, 3 or 4 years old, he'd be like, going on top of like me or my older brother, me bouncing up and down like he's just riding people, because, maybe he thought that was kind of like, he was like young, so he probably didn't know that that's just inappropriate, really. But I remember like saying, hey, you gotta stop that, because that just looked really fucking awkward. Or I remember when I was a kid, my younger brother, when we were walking down the street, he would like always try, like he was like 3 or 4 years old, he was always trying to hold my hand, and I kept saying, no, stop that, because I'm uncomfortable. Like it makes me feel like, people think that we're a couple, or people think that, he's attracted to me in some way, like we're just holding hands, we're gonna march to the bedroom together, type of thing, really, and sometimes we gotta teach our children that what we have to teach them to respect people's boundaries. If people don't want to hold your hand, that's not going to happen. There's plenty of people that had no problem with their kids kissing strangers. Like I remember, like when I was a filmmaker, sometimes I'd work with child actresses, and after the shoot, they would want to like kiss me or anything like that, and I'm like, no, that's not going on, really. You're a minor, you're 10 years old, you're 8 years old, you're 7 years old. Even if it happens in your parents' household where you kiss them on the lips and stuff like that, you're not going to be kissing me. You're not going to do any of that stuff, because to me, that reads as, as inappropriate. If I had a daughter or a son, I would say the exact same thing. You know what? I'm not kissing you on the mouth, really, because that's disgusting. That's sexual. That's incest. If a cop looks at that, he'll be like, oh my God, I gotta take you guys in. This is the incest family. And importantly, you do not do that to another adult or anybody over the age. You do not do that to another adult, really, because, I don't know that adult, or even if it's like a relative, I do not feel comfortable, because that's inappropriate. And ultimately, if I have a relative that's like, no, like they're my grandson, Byron, this is going to happen. Or if I had like an aunt or uncle, I would say, no, I'll call the cops, or I'm not dealing with you, because that's inappropriate. That's disgusting. That's sexual. And that's just what I believe in. A child should not be kissing an adult on the lips. That is, to me, that reads as sexual, that reads as incest, that reads as a Lolita type of thing. But, I know some people may disagree with me, but we have to get to a point where we respect people's values. We also respect the values of parents raising their kids. And we also have to respect other people's values when it comes to touch. You don't pat people on the back. And I know that probably in the minority, you don't pat people on the back without them knowing. And also, too, when you have children, you have to be very conscious about how you put your hands on them, like whether it goes with, putting your hands on them to tease them, or putting, your hands on them to discipline them, or, you're just trying to be like, okay, you're my kid. You're not or affectionately, or you're almost having an attitude like you're a child. You have to know a child's place, so I can touch you however I want to touch you. If you're not where you're supposed to be, I'm gonna pick you up. I'm gonna drag you. I'm gonna pull you. I'm gonna smack you, or I'm gonna slap you on the butt when you do something wrong. Even in a fun way, even if you're a teenager or whatever, really, or other things like that, really. But I would say that I want people to respect my boundaries, and I also want people to understand that it doesn't make me homophobic, or it doesn't make me like just like sexist or misogynistic. I have a values and I have a belief system that I believe in, but we all have to be respectful of other people's boundaries, because if not, then we live in a world where we live in a double standard world. That like I said, honestly, if I was a woman or a girl, and I express all these things, really, then there will be some cop calls. The cops will be called on a couple of different people to stop some things from continuing on, really. But since I'm a man, it's a little different. Respect other people's boundaries, and again, one of the big reasons why a lot of kids who don't have self-esteem, or a lot of kids struggle with bad behavior or shameless behavior, sometimes that can stem from growing up where they feel objectified, or feel like, okay, you know what, my body is an extension of my parents' body. They can touch me whatever way they want to touch me to, and other things like that, really. So that's why we have to be careful about how we put our hands on people, and also teach respectful boundaries. And sometimes when you deal with family members or people who are more strict with boundaries of themselves or their children, you got to be respectful of it.